This story is long, but every detail matters, so I'll get straight to it. I'm 22 years old, freshly graduated from college. My family has lived in the same 3-story house for as long as I can remember, since I was about 3 or 4 years old. It's a quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind where nothing ever seems to happen. There are only 2 windows you need to know about. My bedroom window on the 2nd floor faces the street, and my dad's home office window on the 3rd floor also faces the street. That becomes important later. Because after what happened last week, I'm convinced something has been watching my family for years. The first incident happened over 10 years ago when I was still in middle school. One weekend morning, I was walking downstairs for breakfast when I overheard my parents talking in the kitchen. My dad sounded uneasy. I caught him saying, "It happened again." When I asked what he meant, they brushed it off. A few days later, my older brother told me the real story. My dad is a lawyer. When deadlines pile up, he works late into the night at home. That night, he was in his 3rd-floor office around midnight when he noticed a Chevy Suburban driving down our street, but it wasn't driving normally. It was crawling, 5 miles per hour, maybe less. At first, he ignored it, but then the car reached the end of the street, turned around, and drove back in the opposite direction. Then it stopped, right in front of our house. My dad watched it closely. Minutes passed. No doors opened. No one stepped out. Nothing moved. Eventually, he returned to his work, occasionally glancing out the window. Around 2 a.m., he fell asleep at his desk. When he woke up at 5:30, the car was still there. Same spot, same position. It finally drove away just before sunrise. That wasn't the first time he'd seen strange cars on our street late at night, but it was the longest they'd ever stayed, and the most unsettling. For years after that, nothing obvious happened. We assumed it was just coincidence, someone sleeping in their car, or at worst, someone casing houses. Life went on in front of my bedroom window, which faces the street. One night, something caught my eye. A brief flicker of light outside, then another. I took off my headphones and looked out the window. There were at least 3 cars driving slowly down the street. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then I realized the people inside the cars were shining flashlights into houses. I watched as the beam swept across the house next door. Then, it moved toward mine. I ducked below the window just before the light reached my room. 2 seconds later, the flashlight beam passed directly across my ceiling. I stayed frozen for 20 seconds. When I looked again, the cars were gone. The next morning, my parents said it was probably criminals casing houses. My dad installed a Ring doorbell and added motion-activated security cameras around the yard. A couple years later, something else happened. While doing landscaping in our backyard, a contractor found something hidden deep inside the bushes near the fence. It was a camera. Tiny. No bigger than a car key. Battery-powered. There was no memory card inside. No SIM card. It wasn't recording anything locally, which meant it may have been streaming live footage to someone nearby. No one could figure out how long it had been there, or who put it there. My parents reported it to the police. Nothing came of it. Eventually, we moved on. A few years later, our next-door neighbors moved out. Their house was vacant for only a few weeks before a new couple moved in. No kids, just a young couple living in a very large house. I started noticing them standing at their top-floor window, looking into our backyard. Always standing, never sitting. Usually late at night, or very early in the morning. I told myself I was just being paranoid. One night, while walking my dog, I glanced into their kitchen through a large bay window. They were sitting at a table with a third person, a man. He was bald, muscular, thick eyebrows, very distinctive. As soon as I noticed them, the woman stood up and closed the curtains. She never looked outside, but it felt like she knew I was there. Last week, my family took a trip to Paris. One night, We were sitting in a bar when I noticed a man sitting alone across the room. Something about him felt familiar. Then it hit me. It was the same man I'd seen in my neighbor's kitchen years earlier. I stared at him. He looked back. We locked eyes. Without finishing his drink or paying his bill, he stood up and walked out. A few days later, I saw him again. Broad daylight, about 50 feet away. He was taking photos with a professional camera. It looked like it was pointed at us. I finally told my parents everything. When we returned home, my dad reviewed all the stored security footage. There was nothing. No cars, no cameras, no neighbors watching. But I know what I saw, and I'm convinced now more than ever. They've been watching my family for over a decade, and I don't think they're done.